Hey, good morning. It's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right. It's me, Uncle Lou, live for you on LouTube today. And thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. It's ACC week here on LouTube. Now, this week didn't really go the way I hoped it would go. My plan was one video a day, Monday through Friday, 5 videos for the ACC. A lot of stuff came up this week. I had to skip a couple of days. Trying my best to make it up over the weekend. I think we're at 3 ACC videos so far this week. I'm going to try to get 2 out today. If for some reason I don't get the second one out today, I'll get it out tomorrow. So the ACC will still get its 5 videos. But let's go ahead and get started on the one today. The Florida State Seminoles, are they really that bad? Let's find out. All right, here we go now with Florida State. Now, if you're enjoying these conference week videos that I'm doing last week with the Big 12, this week with the ACC, we're going to continue next week with the third conference. We're going to do all 5 major conferences. If you're enjoying these videos, make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to the Uncle Lou channel if you're not already. I post college football videos almost every single day of the week, and I do 4 live shows a week, Mondays and Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern. That's a call-in show, so you can call and argue football with me. And then Tuesday and Thursday nights, we do a live show at 10, and what we do on that show sort of varies from day to day depending on what's going on. Make sure you check out those live shows if you haven't already. We do tons of giveaways on the live shows, so come join us over there and talk some football. Now, let's get going with Florida State here. Now, of course, they were 7-6 last year, and by any estimation, a terrible year. Florida State was a top 5 team heading into the season last year. Almost every single preseason poll you looked at had them as a top 5 team. Of course, they had that monumental week 1 matchup against Alabama that was billed as one of the biggest games in the regular season college football in a long time. And of course, it really didn't live up to the hype. And as the season went along, that game looked less and less important in terms of the overall college football season as the wheels started to fall off for the Florida State Seminoles. Now, yes, Florida State did lose their starting quarterback week 1 last year, and I do think that impacted their season. So I'll start there. I do think that had obviously a negative impact on their season going forward. But with that being said, there's no reason that a team as talented as Florida State should completely fall off the map like they did because of any one particular injury, even if it is at the quarterback position. You can look at other college football teams as recently as last year who also lost very highly rated starting quarterbacks, had to play a backup for most or all of the season, and they didn't fall off the map like Florida State did. Georgia's a great example. They lose Eason week 1. Fromm comes in as a true freshman, never played a snap of college football, and takes Georgia to an SEC title, a playoff win, and a spot in the national title game. Alabama won the national title game with a backup quarterback. Had they not had a serviceable, reliable, good backup quarterback, Alabama would not have won that national title game. Florida State loses its quarterback week 1, and it seems like they just can't do anything right. Now, I'm going to put Florida State's schedule up on the screen from last year, and we'll take a look at it, because if we're going to try to answer the question, is Florida State really that bad, we need to look at the games they lost, who they lost to, and how they lost them. So let's go ahead and take a look at that right now. All right, let's start with their first 3 losses. Of course, Alabama, which we already mentioned, which that game really got away from them. They weren't able to do anything offensively in that game, and really just got blown out. NC State and Miami. Okay, NC State. At the time, this looked like a bad loss for Florida State, right? You're coming off an embarrassing performance against Alabama week 1. All that hype, all that build-up, and Florida State really just fell flat week 1. Yes, I know, like I mentioned, they lost their quarterback, but come on, you're Florida State. You recruit an elite level year in and year out. No reason for the wheels to fall off completely like they did just because you're quarterback. So you show up week 2, Blackman gets his first start at quarterback, and you take the loss. At the time, this sent up a lot of red flags for college football fans. Oh no, Florida State, what's going on here? This looked like a bad loss. Now, NC State ended up being a pretty good team last year. So when you look back now, Alabama's loss to NC State doesn't seem nearly as bad as it did when it actually happened. And that's going to be important going forward as we try to answer this question here, are they as bad as we thought they were? Third loss, Miami. Huge rivalry game for Florida State. Florida State has owned Miami in recent years. This one, they take the loss. Now, again, we weren't real sure what to think about this loss at the time. Yes, Miami was undefeated at the time, but this was early in the season. Miami had not looked all that impressive, even in the games that they won. And that was a theme that continued for Miami throughout the duration of the season for the most part. So, again, at this particular time, this looks really, really bad for Florida State. Looking back on it now, we see where Miami ended up, finishing 10-3, winning their division before getting obliterated by Clemson in the ACC title game. But this, again, a loss that, looking back on it, not as bad as it seemed at the time that it happened. All right, now let's take a look at their second three losses. Again, we're going to see a familiar theme here with these losses that we're looking at with Florida State. Okay, their second three losses: Louisville, Boston College, and Clemson. Now, this is where it really goes bad for Florida State, I think. Even looking back now, it's hard to understand losses to Louisville and Boston College. Louisville is sort of the opposite of some of the early losses. This didn't really seem like that bad of a loss at the time because, like, well, it's Louisville. You know, they got Lamar Jackson back, reigning Heisman Trophy winner, one of the most exciting players in college football. Almost definitely a first-round pick in the draft coming up, blah, blah, blah. And you lose by 3. So you're thinking, you know, maybe we're starting to turn things around. Now, when we look back now on this Louisville loss, I think it looks worse. Louisville ended up not being a very good team. I talked about this a little bit in a previous ACC video, and I'll put the link up if you want to check that out. But Bobby Petrino and Louisville, in the 2 years that Lamar Jackson started, were something like 19-8. So, you know, and I mentioned this, the best player Louisville's ever had, Lamar Jackson, the best coach they've had, Bobby Petrino, and the best they can do over a 2-year period is 19-8. Not very impressive. Florida State is a way more talented team than Louisville, even if Louisville has one of the best, most exciting players in college football in Lamar Jackson. So you look back on that Louisville game, I think that was a bad loss. But then you go to the next one at Boston College, and this is absolutely inexcusable. This is one of the worst losses in memory for Florida State. A 35-3 drubbing by a terrible Boston College team. I say terrible. I think they finished 7-6. But ask yourself this: have you spent the last 4 months saying Florida State was terrible last year? Well, they were 7-6. So if you've been saying Florida State was terrible last year, you have to apply that same logic here. Boston College, they play a similar schedule, both being in the ACC, both went 7-6. This is there's no reason in today's football, the way Florida State recruits, that they should ever lose a football game 35-3 to Boston College. Oh, you say, well, I know it was at Boston College. Lou, these teams, a lot of teams tend to lose unexpected road games every year. Clemson lost to a fruit. Syracuse, yeah, they didn't lose 35-3. The only thing really that even comes close to being this embarrassing, I think, from last year's college football season was maybe the Ohio State-Iowa game, where Ohio State's defense just completely didn't show it. They give up 55 points or something to Iowa. But this is even worse. To only score 3 points at Boston College in this game, and really, this was it for Jimbo Fisher, wasn't it? He was out of a job at this point, wasn't he? I know this is only pretty much the halfway point of the season or whatever, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, seventh game. But you lose at Boston College 35-3 after you've already lost to Louisville the week before. You've lost to your number one rival, Miami. You lost the quote-unquote game of the century, week 1, 24-7. You've lost to NC State. I mean, at this point, your season is over. You've got no chance to compete in your division or make an ACC title game, and that's the goal at Florida State. That they're not interested in just being bowl eligible. I mean, let's just be realistic about it. This was absolutely awful, and to me, this was it for Jimbo Fisher. They could have won the rest of their games, which they almost did. And I think he still was out of a job at this point. This is absolutely unacceptable at Florida State. They get a win at Syracuse, and then they travel to Clemson. They take a loss there, but let's, 31-14 to Clemson, that's not really a bad or humiliating loss. Now, I know Florida State fans are going to say, well, we should put a better product on the field. We should be closer to Clemson than that. I get it, but Clemson blew a lot of teams out last year. They were a legitimate team with an amazing defense. You lose by 2 touchdowns and a field goal at Clemson when you already knew your season was over. So I don't really look at this game as a disappointment for Florida State or anything like that. They at this point in the season, they were expected to get blown out in this game, and that's what they did. You beat Delaware State. You go to Florida. You beat Florida. Now, this at least gives Florida State fans something to be happy about towards the end of last season. Anytime Florida State and Florida play, bragging rights on the line. Yes, Florida was terrible last year, and obviously they were worse even than Florida State. Florida, I think, only won 4 games last year. But still, you go on the road in Gainesville and beat an in-state rival, Florida Gators, 38-22. You follow that up with a win over Louisiana Monroe, and then a bowl game against Southern Miss that you also win. Now, so you look here and you say, well, they won their last 4 games. Well, where I get that. Where's the good win, though? There's not a good win in those last 4 games. Those are 4 terrible teams. Louisiana Monroe, Delaware State, Southern Miss, and Florida. 4 awful teams last year. So better than losing your last 4. Yeah, I get that. But still, no impressive win there. So, was Florida State as bad as they appeared to be at the time while these losses were piling up last year? I'm going to say no. And I'm surprised that I'm coming to that conclusion because I rode Florida State really, really hard last year. Deservedly so. But looking back now at some of these losses, most of their losses were to better teams. It wasn't like they just gave up or didn't show up. A couple of games, yeah, the Louisville and the Boston College game are really the 2 that stand out to me as games that there's really no way to justify those 2 losses. But the other 4, I feel like Florida State just lost to the better team. I think NC State was just a better team. I think Alabama was just a better team. Clemson, obviously, a better team, and Miami, obviously, a better team last year than Florida State. What's going to happen in 2018? Well, a lot of these questions will be answered for sure in 2018. If Florida State turns around again and goes 7-6 in 2018, then I'm wrong, and yes, Florida State is really that bad. When I look at Florida State's roster, though, it appears to me to be the most talented roster in the ACC outside of the Clemson Tigers. Now, does that mean they're going to go 11-1 every year? And no, of course. Almost every team in America loses at least 1 game a year that they're not supposed to lose. But it just doesn't make any sense to me that a team as talented as Florida State could possibly win any less than 9 games. It makes no sense at all. So let's look at 2018 now. I'll put it up. Here it is. All right. So is Florida State as bad as they looked last year, and will they look that bad again in 2018? Now, I'm not going to go through here game by game and give any sorts of predictions or anything like that. I have a whole series of videos that I do over the summer. The last 2 weeks of July and the first couple of weeks of August, I do in-depth, detailed preview and prediction videos for every major team in all 5 of the major conferences, plus Notre Dame and a couple of non-Power 5s too. I'm starting to get all that lined up now. That'll be the end of July and beginning of August. But I just want to take a brief overview look at this 2018 schedule here. And I mean, you guys tell me in the comment section down below how many losses for Florida State in 2018 would be acceptable. You got a new coach, Willie Taggart, installing a new system. Some questions at quarterback. Francois should be back. Or do you go with Blackman, who played last year? A little strange to me, week 1, Virginia Tech conference game on Memorial Day, a Monday. These are usually reserved for like your Chick-fil-A kickoff classic game. Last year you had Tennessee and Georgia Tech. So a little strange to me that you have a conference game week 1 as that special Labor Day. I think I might have said Memorial Day the first time, but that's Labor Day. game here, Virginia Tech. That's going to be a tough game. Now, it's in Tallahassee. That helps, but it's possible Florida State loses that game, I guess. I don't see them losing any of their next 4. That includes the Louisville game. Miami, you got to figure Miami's going to be a favorite in that game. It's at Miami. They returned some talent from last year. They've got some consistency now with Mark Richt heading into his 3rd year. I guess you would figure Miami is supposed to win that one. Wake Forest and a good team, an above average team in the ACC, but again, not a team Florida State should ever be losing to, in my opinion. Once every 4 or 5 years, yeah. But this is a team, if Florida State is, if the answer to the question is no, Florida State's not as bad as they looked last year, then Florida State will win this game, right? Clemson, you got to figure Clemson's favored there at NC State. Again, I think Florida State a better team than NC State. NC State loses a ton of talent. This is a game you would think Florida State would win at Notre Dame. Probably give Notre Dame the edge there. Boston College, you should win. Florida's a toss-up. You don't know what you're getting with Dan Mullen. I would give the coaching advantage to Dan Mullen there. But again, anytime you've got 2 teams playing each other and both have first-year coaches, and it's hard really to break that game down in the preseason. You don't really know what you're going to get out of a team with a first-year coach. So hard to get a feel for that game really one way or the other. Now, if Florida State loses 6 of these games next year, then there's bigger problems in Tallahassee than what I'm able to see right now. I think a big part of the problem last year was Jimbo Fisher really just didn't want to be there anymore. Losing the quarterback, I think, became more of an excuse during the season than it did an actual reason for their struggles. Hard to imagine things going that bad for Florida State again this year, which is why I'm answering the question the way I'm answering it. No, Florida State is not as bad as they looked last year. You go back and look at their last few seasons. They haven't until last year. They hadn't gone 7-6 since 2009. Of course, they won it all in 2013, going 14-0. Since then, 13-1, 10-3, 10-3, and then last year's 7-6 season. So hard to imagine the wheels coming off for Florida State like they did last year, even though you take a look at the schedule there that I had up. And I mean, that's not an easy schedule by any means, but we're talking about Florida State. So again, to answer the question, no, I don't think they're as bad as they looked last year. But this will be one of the most interesting teams to watch this year for sure, because they were so bad last year and the new coach and all that. So we'll see. Anyway, appreciate you guys watching. If you want to watch the other ACC videos, I'll put a link up to them somewhere up here. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good morning, too.